They called them obstacles, not graves, not people. Obstacles. 12 headstones, some older than the houses surrounding them, some older than the road that led into the neighborhood, gone in less than 48 hours. Flattened. The ground still raw when I got there. Dark, wet clay turned inside out like something had been pulled from it that didn't want to leave, and she was standing right in the middle of it, clipboard in hand. Blazer pressed, expression calm, like she was inspecting a landscaping job. "Mr. Whitfield," she said before I could even speak, "I understand this may be emotional, but this was a necessary improvement for the community." Necessary. That word stayed with me longer than it should have. Because standing there breathing in diesel fumes and fresh dirt, looking at a space where 12 people had been buried for over a century, there was nothing necessary about it. I looked at her, really looked, trying to understand how someone gets to that place where history becomes inconvenience, where memory becomes an obstacle. "You removed graves," I said. She didn't flinch. "There was no legally protected cemetery designation," she replied, like she'd rehearsed it. "The board acted within its authority. The board." That's when I understood something important. This wasn't a mistake. This was a decision. And decisions leave trails. I nodded once, didn't argue, didn't raise my voice, didn't give her the reaction she was clearly prepared for. Instead, I said something she would spend the next year and a half wishing she had taken seriously. "All right," I told her quietly. "Then we'll let the documents decide." She smiled. That same controlled, patient smile. The kind people wear when they think they've already won. And that was her mistake. What would you do if someone stood in front of you and told you your family's resting place didn't matter? Think about that for a second. Because most people believe they'd react instantly. Loud, angry, confrontational. But that's not how you win something like this. You don't win it in the moment. You win it later, in a room where the other person realizes they've already lost. Drop it in the comments. What would you have done? Because what I did next didn't start with anger. It started with a drive. My name is Garrison Whitfield. Retired pipe fitter, 31 years working natural gas lines across West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and a stretch of Ohio I don't like to talk about unless someone brings up winter. It's not glamorous work, but it teaches you things, like how to read systems, how to spot pressure before it becomes a problem, and most importantly, how to keep records. Because when something goes wrong, the difference between blame and proof is usually a piece of paper. I moved to Pinecrest Fairways in the spring of 2019, 2 years after my wife passed, Dolores. She had a way of making even the quiet parts of life feel full. After she was gone, the house didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like an echo. My daughter Renata suggested the move. "Something smaller," she said. "Somewhere with people." Pinecrest checked the boxes. Neat lawns, tree-lined streets, a golf course nobody took too seriously, and just enough community to keep you from feeling alone without being overwhelming. At least, that's what the brochure said. What it didn't mention was Clarissa Denor. I met her on a Sunday morning, 2 days after I moved in, 9 a.m. sharp. She knocked like someone who expected the door to open immediately. When I did, she was standing there in a blazer, holding a binder, not just any binder, laminated tabs, color-coded sections. The kind of organization that isn't about efficiency, it's about control. "Mr. Whitfield," she said warmly, "welcome to Pinecrest Fairways." She didn't wait for an invitation, just stepped forward slightly, like she was already halfway inside the conversation. "I wanted to go over a few community guidelines to help you settle in comfortably." That word again, comfortably. You'd think she was doing me a favor. She pointed out my recycling bins first. They're approximately 3 inches too visible from the street. 3 inches. I hadn't even unpacked half my kitchen yet, and she was measuring visibility angles. Then it was my truck. 2009 Ford F-150. Nothing fancy. Guest parking is not intended for oversized vehicles. I'd been parked there for 2 nights, no signs, no markings, no complaints. Until her. Then came the wind chime, a small copper one Renata gave me. It may fall under Section 7.4 regarding exterior disturbances. It didn't. I checked later. Section 7.4 said nothing about wind chimes, but I moved it anyway. Because at that point, I didn't know what kind of person she was. That's the thing about people like Clarissa. They don't start with something big. They start small, tiny corrections, minor suggestions. Biner's suggestions, little adjustments that don't feel worth arguing about. And every time you give in, they learn something. They learn you will. For a while, I kept my head down, followed the rules, or at least the ones that actually existed, went to the occasional community event, nodded at neighbors, kept things quiet. It was enough. Until it wasn't. The cemetery wasn't something you noticed unless you knew where to look, tucked behind a stand of old trees in the northeast corner of the property. No signs pointing to it, no mention in the welcome packet, just a small fenced area with 12 headstones. Weather, uneven. Some leaning slightly with age. Names worn but still readable if you got close enough. Dates going back to the late 1800s. It wasn't large, but it mattered. You could feel that just standing there. The kind of place that makes you lower your voice without thinking about it. I found out about it from Clarence O'Coffer. Good man, practical, observant. We were talking one evening about the neighborhood history, and he mentioned it casually. Old family plot back there, he said, protected by the original land agreement. That caught my attention, so I did what I always do when something feels off. I looked it up. County records are easier to access than most people think. Took me about 20 minutes online. Deed from 1973. Transfer of land from the original farming family to the developer. Buried halfway through the document, there it was. A restriction. Clear. Simple. Binding. The cemetery and all associated graves were to remain undisturbed in perpetuity. That word matters. Perpetuity doesn't expire. It doesn't fade with time. It doesn't depend on who's paying attention. It just is. I didn't think much of it after that. Why would I? Some things feel permanent. Graves are one of them. Or at least, they're supposed to be. Until that Tuesday morning. The call came just after 7 o'clock in the morning. Early enough that the light was still soft, late enough that something felt wrong. It was Clarence. And Clarence wasn't a man who called without a reason. You need to come down here, he said. No greeting, no build-up, just that. What's going on? I asked. There was a pause on the line. Not long, but long enough. They cleared it, he said. Cleared. That word didn't make sense in the moment. Cleared what? Another pause. This one heavier, the graves. I was in my truck before the call ended. Didn't bother with coffee. Didn't grab anything. Just keys. Door, ignition. The engine turned over with that familiar rough start, and I was already backing out of the driveway before my mind had fully caught up to what I'd just heard. Cleared. It still didn't land, because there are certain things your brain refuses to process right away. Graves are one of them. The drive across Pinecrest took less than 3 minutes. I remember every second of it, the way the morning felt thicker than usual, the way the neighborhood looked normal. Sprinklers running, a dog barking somewhere in the distance, a man at the corner mailbox flipping through envelopes like it was any other Tuesday. Nothing looked wrong, and that made it worse. I turned onto the narrow access path that led toward the northeast corner. The trees should have been there, tall hemlocks, dense, quiet. They weren't. What replaced them was open sky. I parked without thinking, left the engine running, stepped out, and that's when the smell hit me. Diesel, fresh dirt, that sharp mineral scent of ground that hasn't been touched in a long time, suddenly forced open. It hits the back of your throat, stays there. The clearing stretched wider than IRAM, embered. Because it wasn't a clearing anymore, it was a construction site. Raw earth, uneven, torn apart. The color of the soil had changed too, darker, almost red in places, like it had been dragged up from somewhere deeper than it should have been. Tree stumps sat scattered across the ground, freshly cut, pale in the center where the wood had just been exposed. Sap still wet, still shining in the morning light. The fence, I looked for the fence next. It had been simple, old iron, waist high, nothing decorative, just enough to mark the boundary. It was gone, not removed, destroyed, bent into shapes metal isn't supposed to bend into unless something heavy runs straight through it without slowing down. It sat in a pile off to the side like scrap. And the graves? I already knew the answer, but I looked anyway, walked forward a few steps, stopped, looked again. Nothing. No stones, no markers, no sign that anything had ever been there. Just disturbed ground, flattened in some places, uneven in others, like something had been taken out, and the land hadn't decided what to do with the absence yet. A backhoe sat about 40 feet away, engine off. metal still ticking as it cooled. That quiet clicking sound machines make after they've done something they shouldn't have. I stood there longer than I can measure, not thinking, not reacting, just trying to reconcile what I was seeing with what I knew had been there. Because I had stood in that exact spot before, read those names, seen those dates, and now, nothing. Her voice came from behind me, calm, measured, exactly the same tone she used when she told me my trash bins were too visible. I didn't turn right away, didn't need to. I already knew it was her. I know what you're going to say, she continued. That did it. I turned. Clarissa Dunor stood near the backhoe, clipboard in hand. Blazer, even in the heat, hair perfectly in place, like she had planned to be seen. There were graves here, I said. Straight, simple, no room to misinterpret. Not agreement, acknowledgement. There was an informal memorial area, she corrected. Informal, memorial, area. She broke it into pieces, softened it, reduced it, and then she actually made air quotes. 2 fingers of her clipboard hand lifting slightly in the air. That was the moment I knew. Not suspected. Knew. She was lying. Because 3 months earlier, I had seen the document, pulled it myself, county records, stamped, recorded, clear. There was nothing informal about it. Those graves were protected, I said. Still calm, still controlled, because anger here would have been wasted. She shook her head lightly. The board conducted a full review prior to approving the expansion. No enforceable designation was found. There it was again, authority, confidence. The assumption that if she said it clearly enough, it would become true. I'd like to see that review, I said. She smiled, not wide, just enough. I'll have our attorney prepare a summary for you. A summary. Not the documents, not the filings. A summary, something filtered, something controlled. I'd like the original documents, I said. Of course, she replied immediately. Too quickly, like she had expected the request, like she already had an answer prepared. She wrote something on her clipboard, short note. Precise, then looked back up at me, still smiling. That's when I understood something else. She wasn't worried, not even a little, because in her mind, this was already handled, signed off, closed, and people like Clarissa, fed. I don't bluff unless they think nobody can call it. I nodded once, turned, walked back to my truck. Didn't say another word. As I got in, I caught one last detail. A crow had landed on one of the stumps, watching, head tilted slightly, like it was waiting to see what I would do next. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, hands on the wheel, engine still running, the smell of dirt still in the air. Then I reached over to the passenger seat, grabbed a folded envelope, empty. Didn't even know why I kept those in the truck, probably habit. Set it on the dashboard, looked at it for a second. Then I put the truck in gear, and instead of going home, I drove straight to the county recorder's office. Because if there's one thing I've learned after 31 years working with systems that can fail without warning, it's this. When something doesn't make sense, you don't argue, you verify. And somewhere in a filing cabinet or a digital record nobody had bothered to check in years was the truth. All I had to do was go get it. The county recorder's office sits in a building most people drive past without noticing. Brick, 2 stories. A flag out front that doesn't get replaced as often as it should. I've been there once before, years back, for something unrelated. Back then, it felt like a place you only go when you have to. This time, it felt like the only place that mattered. I parked out front, cut the engine, and stepped inside. The air was cooler, quiet. That particular kind of quiet you only get in government buildings where nothing moves fast, but everything gets recorded. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A woman behind the front desk looked up briefly, then back down at her screen. No urgency, no curiosity, just routine. Deed records, I said. She nodded once. Like she, E.T. heard it 1,000 times. Back room. Terminal access is open. That was it. No questions, no forms, just direction. I walked past a row of chairs no one was sitting in and into the records room. 4 computers, 2 occupied, one man scrolling slowly, like he had nowhere else to be. Another flipping through printed pages with a pencil in hand. Everyone quiet, everyone focused. I took the empty terminal near the wall, sat down, cracked my knuckles without thinking about it. Old habit. Then I started searching. Property records. Allegheny County, 1973 transfer, Pinecrest Development. It took less than 10 minutes. Less than that, actually. Because once you know what you're looking for, systems are predictable. The document came up on the screen. Scanned copy. Black and white. Typed. Signatures at the bottom. And there, halfway down the page, exactly where I remembered it. The clause. Clear. Uncomplicated. Legally binding. The cemetery located on the northeast quadrant of the property, including all graves and markers, shall remain undisturbed in perpetuity. This restriction shall bind all current and future owners. I read it twice, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to feel it settle. Undisturbed. In perpetuity. Not flexible. Not optional. Not open to interpretation. I leaned back slightly in the chair, let out a slow breath. So she lied, not misunderstood, not overlooked, lied. And that changed everything, because mistakes can be corrected. Misunderstandings can be explained. But a lie means intent. I printed the document, then printed it again and again. 6 copies total. Didn't rush it. Watched each page slide out of the machine like it mattered. Because it did. At the front desk, I paid. $18. Lars. The woman stamped each copy without looking up. Certified official. Real. $18. That's all it took to turn a conversation into a case. I stepped outside with the documents in hand. The air felt different, not lighter, sharper. Because now this wasn't about what I thought. It wasn't about what she said. It was about what could be proven. I sat in my truck and spread the copies across the passenger seat, looked at them for a moment, then reached for my phone. First call, Clarence. She lied, I said when he picked up. No greeting. Didn't need one. I figured. He replied, I've got the deed. Certified. There was a pause. Then, what do we do? That's the moment most people rush. Jump straight to confrontation. Call the person out. Demand answers. But that's not how you win. You don't confront someone when you only have one piece, I said. You build the whole picture first. Silence on the line. Then, all right, he said. What do you need? I looked down at the papers again. At the clause. At the word perpetuity. I need names, I said. Because documents tell you what's supposed to happen, people tell you what actually did. The next call was to Mara Petrov. Paralegal. Sharp. Detail-oriented. The kind of person who doesn't just read documents, she understands them. When I told her what had happened, she didn't react right away. Just listened. Let me finish. You have the deed? She asked. Yes. Certified, yes. Another pause. Short. Focused. Certified, yes. Another pause. Short. Focused. Okay, she said. Send me a copy. No emotion. No outrage. Just process. That's when I knew we were on the right track. Because anger fades. Process doesn't. By that evening, 4 people had the document. Me, Clarence, Mara, and Walt Drury. Walt didn't say much when I handed it to him. Just held the paper in both hands. Looked at it for a long time. I used to bring flowers there, he said quietly. I know. They didn't even leave the stones. No. He nodded slowly. Not surprised. Just disappointed. In a way that felt heavier than anger. That stayed with me because this wasn't just about law. It was about something older than that. Something quieter. Respect. The next step came the following morning. I made one more call. This one outside the neighborhood, outside the HOA, outside Clarissa's reach, the Pennsylvania Bureau of Historic Preservation. Most people don't think to call them. Most people don't even know they exist. But they do. And more importantly, they have authority. The woman on the line listened carefully, didn't interrupt, didn't rush me. When I finished, she asked one question. Do you have documentation of the site's protected status? Yes, I said. Certified deed restriction. There was a pause, different from the others. This one, deliberate. All right, she said. We're going to take a closer look at this. No promises, no guarantees. But the tone had changed, because now, this wasn't a neighborhood dispute. It was something bigger. After the call, I sat at the kitchen table with the documents spread out in front of me, morning light coming through the window, coffee untouched, and for the first time since I got that call from Clarence, I felt something settle into place. Not relief, not satisfaction, direction. Because the moment you move from reacting to building a case, everything changes. Clarissa thought this was over. Approved. Closed. Handled. She thought the story ended when the ground was cleared, but she missed something important. That's not where stories end. That's where they start. And now, we had the first piece. Proof. And once you have proof, you don't rush. You don't argue. You don't warn. You build. Carefully. Quietly. Until the person who thought they were in control realizes they were standing on something fragile the entire time. The first thing I learned after getting the document was this. Proof doesn't win by itself. You can hold the truth in your hands, stamped, certified, undeniable, and still lose. Because the other side isn't playing for truth. They're playing for control. Clarissa understood that better than most. She didn't argue facts. She managed perception. 3 days after I requested the documents from her, the email went out, neighborhood-wide. Subject line, Community Improvement Update. I read it once, then again. Slower. She described the golf course expansion as a carefully reviewed enhancement project. She referred to the cemetery as, and I remember this exactly, an unregistered historical reference area, not graves, not a burial site, a reference area. She even included a line about increasing long-term property value for all residents. That one was almost impressive, because it told me exactly what she was doing. She wasn't trying to convince me. She was insulating herself from everyone else. Most people reading that email wouldn't question it. Why would they? It sounded official, calm, confident. And that's all it takes most of the time. I forwarded the email to Mara. She called me 10 minutes later. She's building a narrative, she said. I know. You need to move faster. That gave me pause. Because moving fast is how people make mistakes. She already is, Mara continued. And if you don't get ahead of it, this becomes your word against hers. I looked at the documents on the table, at the stamped copies. It's not my word, I said. It will be, she replied, if you don't put this somewhere that matters. That was the moment the strategy shifted, because up until then, this was still contained, local, manageable. Now, it needed to be official. The Bureau of Historic Preservation sent their agent 2 days later, Teresa Holbrook. She arrived just before noon. No announcement, no attention, just a state vehicle parked quietly along the access road. She stepped out with a folder under one arm and a camera in the other. Mid-50s maybe. Calm, focused, the kind of presence that doesn't need to speak loudly to be taken seriously. We walked the site together, didn't talk much at first. Didn't need to. She took her time. Photographs from multiple angles. Close-ups of the disturbed ground, the broken fence, the stumps. At one point, she knelt down and ran her fingers lightly over the soil, like she was reading something written there. How long ago? She asked. Less than a week, she nodded, made a note. Then she stood, brushed her hands off, and looked at me directly for the first time. Do you have the deed restriction? I handed her a certified copy, already prepared. She took it, read it once, then again. Slower. I watched her expression carefully, not looking for emotion, looking for change. And I saw it, subtle. But there, a shift. She folded the document carefully, placed it back in the folder. Mr. Whitfield, she said, don't go anywhere. That was it. No explanation, no reassurance. But it was enough, because that's the kind of sentence that only comes out when something has crossed a line. By the next morning, the first official action hit. A cease and desist order. Bright orange stakes appeared at the site. Stayed issued, placed with precision. Work stopped immediately. No more equipment, no more activity, just silence. The kind of silence that comes after something has been interrupted mid-motion. I happened to be walking past when Clarissa saw them. She was standing near the edge of the fairway, clipboard in hand, like always. She spotted the stakes from a distance, stopped walking, and for a brief second, just a second, her expression changed. Not panic, not fear, but something close to it. Then it was gone, replaced by that same composed smile. She recovered fast. I'll give her that. By the end of the day, she had a lawyer. His name was Bradford Silas. You could tell the type before he even spoke. Tailored suit, cufflinks, confident posture. He sent the letter within 48 hours. Formal, polished, designed to sound authoritative. The argument was simple. and dangerous. The deed restriction, he claimed, was unenforceable because no direct descendants of the original family were present to assert it. It had just enough legal weight to make people hesitate, because to someone unfamiliar with how these things work, it sounds reasonable. No one to enforce it. Then who does? That's how arguments like that survive. Not because they're correct, but because they create doubt, Mara called me that evening. It's weak, she said. But it buys them time. Time. That's what this had be. Ecom. A race. Not just to prove the truth, but to establish it before they could reshape it. And Clarissa, she was still moving. Another email went out, this time inviting residents to a ribbon-cutting ceremony for the new golf hole, scheduled for Saturday. Dress code included. Smart casual. I read that line 3 times. Smart casual. For ground that had been torn open less than a week ago. That's when I realized something else. She wasn't backing down. She was doubling down, because people like Clarissa don't admit mistakes. They bury them. The problem was, this time, she had already tried, and the ground hadn't let her. Clarissa's lawyer bought her time. But time cuts both ways. Because while she was trying to slow things down, we were building something she couldn't see yet. The first real crack didn't come from a courtroom. It came from a phone call. Mara Petrov had spent the better part of a week digging through records most people don't even know exist. Genealogy databases, archived census logs, marriage records, quiet work, patient work, the kind that doesn't look like progress until it suddenly is sud. She called me on a Thursday evening. I found him, she said. Found who? Because that was the one thing Bradford Silas had leaned on. No descendants, no standing, no case. Where? I asked. Columbus, Ohio, she said. Name's Aldous Keswick. 73, retired teacher. I didn't say anything for a moment, because just like that, the entire argument collapsed. Does he know? I asked. Another pause. Short. He does now. What did he say? Mara let out a breath. He went quiet, she said. For a long time. I nodded a breath. He went quiet, she said. For a long time. I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. And then, he asked me one question. I waited. Who do I need to talk to? What? That was it. No outrage, no disbelief, just direction. That's when I knew this wasn't just moving forward anymore. It was accelerating. Aldous arrived that Saturday. No announcement. No attention. He drove in quietly, parked near the edge of the neighborhood, and walked the rest of the way. I met him near the site. Tall, thin, wire-rimmed glasses. The kind of posture you see in people who have spent decades standing in front of classrooms. Measured, calm. We shook hands. He didn't say much at first, just nodded once, and walked past me, toward the clearing. He stood there for a long time, hands in his coat pockets, boots crunching lightly against the dry surface. The ground had already started to change. What had been wet and raw a few days earlier was now drying, cracking slightly at the surface, like something trying to heal, but doing it wrong. Aldous didn't move, didn't speak, just looked. I stayed back, gave him space, because some moments don't belong to anyone else. After a while, he finally spoke. My grandfather is under there somewhere. Not a question, not an accusation, just a fact. Flat, heavy. I didn't respond, didn't need to. He nodded once, almost to himself, then turned back toward me. What happens next? He asked. Simple, direct. And that's when everything shifted. Because now, this wasn't a technical argument anymore. This was personal. Legal standing established. Human impact undeniable. Bradford Silas adjusted quickly. He dropped the no descendant argument almost immediately. Pivoted to something else. Abandonment. Another legal angle. Another attempt to weaken the restriction. His claim that the cemetery had not been actively maintained or formally enforced for years, and therefore the restriction had effectively lapsed. Again, just enough logic to sound plausible, and again, wrong. But here's the thing about arguments like that. They don't need to be right. They just need to create delay. Vivian Marsh entered the picture that same week. Recommended by Mara. She didn't make a big impression at first. Didn't try to. Black suit, minimal expression, quiet voice. But when she spoke, you listened. She read Bradford's filing in about 10 minutes. Didn't react immediately. Just set it down. That won't hold, she said. Why not? I asked. She looked at me like I'd asked the right question. Because cemetery restrictions are treated differently, she said. They're not subject to standard abandonment doctrine. She paused. There's case law, established clear. That was it. No drama, no emphasis. Just certainty. And certainty, when it's backed by knowledge, is a powerful thing. She filed the response within 48 hours, precise, focused, citing precedent, referencing statutes, not arguing, correcting. The judge's ruling came back faster than expected. 3 paragraphs. Short, direct. The last sentence stayed with me. The moving party's interpretation is strained to the point of implausibility. Implausible. That's a polite way of saying, this doesn't make sense. Bradford lost that round. But Clarissa, she still had control. She still ran the HOA, still controlled the meetings, still controlled the funds. And as long as she had that, she could keep pushing. So we changed the field, not the legal one, the social one. I called a meeting, not an official HOA meeting. She would have blocked that. A community meeting held in my backyard. Saturday evening, warm air, folding chairs, a cooler full of drinks, string lights strung across the fence. Nothing formal, nothing intimidating. Just people. Out of 44 households, 30 showed up. That told me everything I needed to know, because people don't show up unless something matters. I didn't give a speech, didn't need to. I laid the documents out on a table, the deed, the cease and desist, the court ruling, and next to them, Clarissa's summary, 2 pages, no references, no sources, just words. I let them sit there, side by side, truth next to narrative, side by side, truth next to narrative, and I stepped back. Because sometimes the strongest argument is letting people see the difference for themselves. The room went quiet, not silent, but focused, people reading, comparing, processing. Then someone spoke. Harriet Stoll, 22 years in the neighborhood, never once challenged Clarissa publicly. Until that moment, she lied, she said. 2 words clear, unfiltered, and something shifted. You could feel it, like pressure releasing. Because once one person says it out loud, others realize they were thinking it too. And that's the moment control starts to break. Clarissa responded exactly how I expected, not by addressing the issue, but by tightening her grip. Within a week, violation notices went out. 16 households, lawn height, fence visibility, parking violations, buys, ings that had been ignored for years, suddenly urgent. My truck was cited again. Same spot, same situation. Nothing had changed. Except, now she needed leverage. And that told me something important. She was rattled. Because people who are in control don't escalate like that. They don't need to. But people who feel control slipping, they push harder, use whatever tools they have left, even if it exposes them. And that's exactly what Clarissa was starting to do. She just didn't realize yet how much she was exposing. Clarissa thought the violation notices would push people back into line. That's how it had always worked. Small pressure, targeted discomfort, enough inconvenience to remind people it was easier to stay quiet. But something had changed. Because this time, people had seen the documents. They had read them, compared them. They had read them, compared them, held them in their hands. And once you see the difference between truth and control, you don't unsee it. Instead of backing down, 16 households did the opposite. They challenged every single notice, formally, simultaneously. That mattered, because under the HOA rules, every violation required a process. Written notice, time to respond, then a hearing. Clarissa had spent 7 years running meetings that lasted 15 minutes. Quick approvals, no pushback. Now, every single hearing had to be scheduled, documented, argued, and we showed up to all of them. With evidence, photos, dates, comparisons, not opinions, proof. The meetings stretched from minutes to hours, and for the first time, Clarissa had to answer questions. Not deflect, not summarize. Answer. You could see it wearing on her. The binder got thicker, the smile tighter, the tone sharper. She started bringing more coffee. That's always a sign, because control takes energy, and when it starts slipping, it takes more. Then she made a mistake. Not legal, strategic. She went to the press, but not real press, the Pinecrest Gazette, a neighborhood circular, run by a man named Doyle, who also happened to be her brother-in-law. The headline read, "Activist Group Disrupts Community Stability." I read it once. Then again, it described me as an outsider, questioned my motives, suggested that the situation had caused unease among long-term residents. It never mentioned the graves, not once. That was the part that mattered, because when someone avoids the central fact, it tells you exactly what they're afraid of. I showed the article to Vivian. She didn't react right away. Just read it carefully. Then she circled 2 phrases. Outsider, unclear motives. She's leaving fingerprints, she said. I looked at her. How? Because now, she said, any real reporter is going to ask what she's not saying. And she was right. Because real attention doesn't follow noise. It follows gaps. 2 days later, the call came. Dominic Ferrante, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. He had already seen the initial filings, already tracking the Bureau investigation. Now, he had a local article trying to redirect the narrative. Why aren't they mentioning the graves, he asked. That's how the conversation started. Not skepticism, curiosity. I told him everything. No exaggeration, no spin, just facts, and I sent him the documents, all of them. The deed, the cease and desist, the court ruling. He read them, really read them, because that's what professionals do. The story ran the following week. This time, the headline told the truth. And once that happened, everything accelerated. Because now, this wasn't a neighborhood issue, it was public. And public pressure is different. Emails started coming in, not just from residents, from outside. People asking questions, requesting information. Clarissa wasn't used to that. Her system worked in isolation, controlled environment, limited exposure. Now, she was visible. And visibility breaks control. That's when she made her biggest mistake. She called an emergency board meeting. No public notice, no community access, technically allowed under a rarely used clause. And in that meeting, she authorized an additional $40,000 in legal fees from HOA reserves. To keep fighting, that decision changed everything because one of the board members, Roland Faber, did something unexpected. He forwarded the meeting minutes, quietly, directly, to Vivian. No explanation, no message, just the document, and inside that document was a number that didn't add up. The O-Prime Maintenance Reserve should have been around $45,000, years of contributions, consistent funding, but the reported balance, $3,200. That's not a discrepancy. That's a hole, and holes lead somewhere. Vivian called me that evening. Come to my office tomorrow, she said. Her tone was different, not urgent, not alarmed, focused. Bring every financial document you have, she added. Going back how far? All of it. I didn't ask why. Didn't need to. Because after 31 years working with systems under pressure, you learn something important. When the numbers stop making sense, that's where the real story starts. And Clarissa, she had just turned a legal problem into a financial one, which is worse because legal arguments can be stretched, delayed, reframed. Numbers, they don't move. They don't explain themselves. They just sit there waiting for someone to notice. And now we had noticed, which meant whatever she had built over the past 7 years was about to be measured properly. Vivian's office didn't look like much from the outside. Second floor, narrow hallway, frosted glass door with her name in small black lettering. Inside, it smelled like strong coffee and old paper, the kind of place where things get figured out. She had the table already covered when I walked in, documents spread out in clean lines, highlight, tabbed, connected. Sit, she said. I did. She didn't waste time. Walk me through everything you have, she said. So I did. Every newsletter, every dues statement, every budget summary I'd kept since moving in. She listened, didn't interrupt. Then she started marking numbers, quietly, carefully, tracing patterns, the course expansion, $180,000 total cost. The HOA had officially approved $95,000. That left $85,000 unaccounted for. I leaned forward slightly. Where did the rest come from? I asked. She tapped a line item. External development contributions. No names, no details. Just a phrase. That's not a source, I said. No, she replied. It's a cover. She pulled another document from the ACDIs. She pulled another document from the DIRO. Stack, company registration, Pennsylvania records. Green Summit Leisure LLC. Real estate development firm. Recently active. Quiet acquisitions across the county. And then she flipped to the last page. Registered agent, Bradford Silas. The same attorney defending the HOA. I didn't say anything at first. Because sometimes the information needs a second to land. You're telling me I started. I'm telling you, Vivian said calmly, that the man representing the HOA has a financial interest in the company funding the project. Conflict of interest. Clear. Direct. Bract. And Clarissa, I asked. Vivian slid one more document across the table. Business filings. Single member LLC. Registered 6 months before the expansion vote. Owner. Clarissa Denor. I stared at it. Look at the transaction logs, Vivian said. I did. $42,000. Transferred in increments. Labeled as consulting fees. From Green Summit, through her LLC, into accounts tied to HOA-controlled funds. I leaned back in the chair, not surprised, but confirmed, because at some level, I think I already knew. People don't take risks like that unless there's something in it for them. She didn't just approve it, Vivian said. She profited from it. That's the difference. And that difference changes everything. And that difference changes everything. Because now, this isn't just a civil issue. It's fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, potential criminal exposure. And once those doors open, they don't close quietly. Vivian closed the folder. We move on 3 fronts, she said. Legal, financial, community, all at once. Because timing matters. If one moves without the others, it weakens the whole structure. I nodded. Tell me what to do. And she did. The legal track started immediately. Civil complaint filed against Clarissa personally, not just as HOA president, as an individual. Naming her actions, her LLC. Naming her actions, her LLC. Her financial gain. A second complaint filed with the Attorney General's office. Consumer protection. Fraud. Conflict of interest. And a third against Bradford Silas. Professional misconduct. Vivian didn't emphasize that one, but I noticed the way she said it. Calm, precise, like she already knew how that would end. The financial track was even cleaner. Mara organized the audit demand. Under state law, residents could force a full financial audit. Required threshold, 20%. We had over 70. Signatures, names, addresses documented. Certified, sent. Clarissa had 30 days to comply or face court enforcement. That clock started ticking immediately. And the community track, that was Clarence. Because Clarence understood something I didn't at first. Rules don't just limit you. They define the game. The HOA documents required an annual meeting, open to residents with proper notice financial disclosure. Board voting. Clarissa had been scheduling them at 7 a.m. Low turnout, minimal resistance. But the rules didn't say she had to send the notice. They only said it had to be delivered, so we delivered it. Every house, every door, proper format, correct language. Time, 7 p.m. Location, community center. Accessible, neutral. And we documented everything. Photos, timestamps, proof of delivery. Clarissa responded the next morning. Her own notice. Same date, 7 a.m. Her garage, 2 meetings, same day. Only one would matter. Because only one would matter. Because only one would have people. We invited more than residents. Aldous, Dominic Ferrante, Agent Holbrook, and a CPA, Bertram Schultz. He had finished the audit early. His charts were simple, blue for legitimate spending, red for unauthorized. When he showed me the breakdown, I didn't say anything. Didn't need to, because the ratio said everything. The night of the meeting, the room filled, 38 households represented. More than enough. People standing along the walls, sitting on window ledges, waiting. Clarissa held her meeting that morning. 4 people attended. They voted, approved everything, then left. By evening, Her control existed only on paper. At 7:02, we started. Vivian spoke first, clear, measured. Timeline, documents, evidence. No emotion, no exaggeration. Just truth. Bertram followed. Charts on screen. Red dominating blue. The room reacted. Not loudly, but you could feel it. Then Aldous stood. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. He spoke for 4 minutes. About his grandfather. About his grandfather. About standing on that ground. About what it means. When someone decides your history doesn't matter. The room went silent, completely. When he sat down, the outcome was already decided. The vote came next. Remove Clarissa. Overwhelming. Replace her. Unanimous. Audit enforcement. Audit enforcement. Approved. Legal action. Approved. It was over. Not loudly, not dramatically, just completely. Clarissa arrived late. Walked in as people were talking. Same blazer, same clipboard, same smile. But something had changed. Not outwardly, but underneath. She looked at the screen, at the charts, at the room, then at me. I'd like to address the community, she said. Vivian didn't even look up. This meeting has adjourned. Clarissa stood there for a moment, then turned and walked out. The door closed behind her, and that was it. The trap didn't close that night, and that was it. The trap didn't close that night. It had already closed. That was just the moment she realized it. The real ending came later. Court filings, investigations, settlements, $228,000. That's what it cost her. Money, position, reputation, all gone. Because she made one assumption that nobody would check, but someone did. And that's all it takes. One person, one document, $18, and the willingness to follow it all the way through. The graves were restored that winter. New stones, proper markers, set back into the ground where they belonged. People showed up. Quiet, respectful, no speeches, just presence. Because some things don't need words. They just need to be made right. So if you take anything from this, take this. Power doesn't come from being right. It comes from nobody questioning you. And the moment someone does, really does, everything built on that silence starts to fall apart. So read your documents, check the details. Because somewhere out there, someone is counting on you not to. And sometimes changing everything starts with something as small as deciding you will.